It's time to update our Dynasty Cornerstone rankings. These are players that are under the age of 25, so 24 or younger. If they are 25 or older than that, they are not on this list. It doesn't mean they're not a Cornerstone asset. Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, still Cornerstone assets. They're just not on this rankings list that we're making today. So 24 and younger, here we go. Let's start in the S tier. These are the guys you should be building your Dynasty teams around. Let's start with Jamar Chase and Amon-Ra St. Brown. Both of these guys in the same tier. Amon-Ra has earned that. Amon-Ra has probably earned to be above Jamar Chase. However, they're in the same tier. If you prefer Jamar, take Jamar. If you prefer Amon-Ra St. Brown, take Amon-Ra St. Brown. One has shown to have a super high floor from a scoring perspective. They're both at the same age. The other one has a really high ceiling and elite wide receiver one ceiling. I would say a higher ceiling than Amon-Ra St. Brown. But with that being said, they're both good options for different types of team depending on what other assets you have on your team. So take whichever one of these guys you want, build your team around them, and they're two of the best picks under 24 in Dynasty Fantasy Football. And so these guys are going to be in the S tier, and there's not really a ton of discussion there. The discussion comes after that in the A tier.
Yeah, so the A tier, we're going to have Puka and Marv and Bijan Robinson all in the same tier here. So Puka is going to be at the top because he's the one that's actually put up 1,400 yards and been the wide receiver 4 overall as a rookie. Marvin hasn't done it yet. There's a lot of projection expecting him to be, elite level. That's why he's going at the 1-2 turn right now in Dynasty startups. Completely understandable. They just drafted him 3rd overall. The Cardinals did, and I personally love the pairing with Kyler Murray. Like, absolutely love it. I remember before he was drafted to the Cardinals in the the early offseason, people were saying that Marv was going to fall if he was taken by the Cardinals. And I was like, what are you talking about? Are you out of your mind? That's where we want him to go. We want him to go to Arizona.
Right.
Anyways, he ends up going there, and then people really grow up or warm up on the landing spot because, of course, it's going to be amazing with incredible passing volume from Kyler. And you've got I think Trey McBride in that offense is going to be super helpful with Marv as well. He's not going to be the only threat there as a receiver. And then you've got Bijan Robinson here at the tail end of this tier. If you wanted to put him up top, I think it's totally reasonable because he is the number 1 running back in Dynasty. Some will say Brees, some will say Gibbs, though I do believe that Bijan is, by popular opinion, for a good reason, the running back 1 in Dynasty. He's got the receiving upside. He has the rushing ability, obviously, where he can take a bell cow workload. Arthur Smith didn't want him to take a bell cow workload last year because why would we ever do that? Now he's playing with Kirk Cousins, who is pass happy, going to get a ton of volume for London and Pitts. They're going to be more explosive as an offense as a whole. They're actually going to be like a dual threat offense where they can run and pass the ball since Ritter isn't throwing the ball anymore. And that'll be really encouraging and really, really positive for Bijan from a production perspective. We expect a lot of things from him this year. I mean, I think anything outside of finishing outside of the top 3 at the running back position is going to be a disappointment.
I think it would too. Let's move down to the B tier. Let's talk about Garrett Wilson. He's a guy that has gotten an absurd amount of targets his first couple of years, just hasn't been able to turn in that wide receiver 1 finish from a scoring perspective because the situation has been so incredibly bad in New York. Now, getting a better quarterback in Aaron Rodgers on the field should help Garrett Wilson and should help keep his dynasty value where it's been at, and that's really in the 2nd, 3rd round, mostly the 2nd round, consistently for the past 2 years. And so we expect that for Garrett Wilson. We also expect it for Breece Hall on the same team. The difference is Breece Hall was able to produce without a good quarterback on the field. He was somebody who had a super high floor last year with tons and tons of targets and showed that he can be an elite back even coming off of an ACL tear. So we expect big things from Breece this year, as well as Drake London. Drake London is another guy similar to Garrett Wilson who, while he has shown that he has flashes, even less so than Garrett Wilson has, he hasn't really produced yet. And this is a guy that has been locked in one of the worst passing offenses in the NFL for the past couple of years. So in Dynasty, there is some risk attached to building your team around Garrett Wilson. With that being said, if and when, in my opinion, Drake London does hit, he is going to be probably worth anywhere from a late 1st to an early 2nd round Dynasty startup pick. And that's when Drake London is a wide receiver 1. When he is a wide receiver 10 or higher, you're going to see everybody overreact because of the age, because of the skill set, because of the situation being tied to Kirk Cousins and then Michael Penix after that for a long time. He's got a lot of long-term value insulation as long as he can put together a solid season this year, which we are betting that he will. We put Malik Neighbors in this tier as well because Malik Neighbors, while the situation is not good, this is a guy that just went top 10 in the NFL draft. And so you're holding out for the New York Giants to draft a quarterback next year. And And once they do, Malik Neighbors' situation becomes drastically better. Hopefully, new quarterback would go well with Brian Daboll. I don't think they'll necessarily need a new coach if they draft over Daniel Jones. But once that happens, his value is going to skyrocket. And so if you're holding Malik Neighbors this year, you're holding with the hope that they get a new quarterback next year. And then Jahmyr Gibbs. And Gibbs is in the same tier as Brees, and they're both one tier behind Bijan. These are the top three running backs in Dynasty Fantasy Football. Jahmyr Gibbs has the highest floor, in my opinion, of any of them. He's on the best offense, in my opinion, of any of them. He does have the biggest committee, in my opinion, of any of them. So there are pros and cons to Jahmyr Gibbs, but mostly pros. This is a guy who, again, has an elite receiving skill set. We knew this coming out of college. You saw it on display in year one. If he can put that together with an increased number of touchdowns, he is going to maintain this second, third Dynasty startup pick value that he has and be somebody that when you're building around him, you think that his lifespan in Dynasty is going to be a little bit longer given what type of back he is and also given the fact that he is in a committee. That's one way it works for him. So Jahmyr Gibbs is a guy, again, you're building your team around from a running back position. You're really happy about that.
Yeah, and then at the top of the C tier, we're going to go with Sam Laporta here, the tight end one in Dynasty. I mean, it wasn't that long ago when the tight end one in Dynasty was going in the A tier in your Cornerstone rankings, right? Remember Kyle Pitts just a couple of years ago? The value of tight ends as a whole has decreased quite a bit, and I think Laporta is not a terrible value at all. In fact, he's a pretty good value when you're getting him in the middle of the third or tail end of the third sometimes. He's falling that far, even in tight end premium formats in Dynasty. So I will say, I do think it's interesting that he managed to be the tight end one last year with only 890 receiving yards. It took 10 touchdowns, right? Now, he did have 120 targets, 86 receptions, but that's not like elite yardage. That is a significant amount of touchdowns. Now, that's encouraging to see from like a red zone opportunity perspective. But again, when you expect touchdowns to fluctuate on a year-to-year basis, you're going to want to obviously see that usage and that yardage go up from Sam Laporta. So just keep that in mind. There might be some fluctuation even up top between, your McBride, Kincaid, and Kyle Pitts this year, who are definitely breathing down Laporta's neck in terms of, getting that crown of the tight end one overall, especially in production for 2024. And then we're going to have Chris Olave here in this tier as well. We know what Chris Olave is, right? He's the number one wide receiver in the New Orleans Saints offense, and Derek Carr is passing him the ball. Let me repeat that Derek Carr is passing him the ball. I mean, that's like, it's not quite a death sentence, but it's not necessarily a positive when Derek Carr at this point in his career is throwing you the ball because he doesn't want to do anything past, 5 yards down the field. And with Chris Olave, he's going to get 140 targets. That's probably not going to turn into wide receiver one production this year. Again, kind of the same as Malik Neighbors. You are expecting, and you are drafting Chris Olave in this range, expecting him to get a better quarterback situation within the next year or two. And that's really going to help maintain his value because there's always going to be that hope and there's always going to be that talent because Olave, it's not his fault, man. It's not his fault that he has a limited ceiling right now. It is all about that offensive situation. It's just not super positive right now. So that's why he is going to be a tier below Drake London, even though a lot of people have them ranked in that same tier. Right. Then Rome Odunze will be at the tail end of this tier as well. He's number one, a Bear, so he's always going to get the Chicago Bear discount, the Chicago Bear benefit of the doubt, and he's tied to Caleb Williams in an offense with DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, and DeAndre Swift, and Cole Kmet even, who are all going to take receiving opportunity in that offense as well. But with Rome Odunze being drafted top 10, you have the expectation, the very reasonable expectation, that he at some point is going to be the alpha wide receiver in that offense. He is going to be the number one option for Caleb Williams, even with the DJ Moore contract, which we're excited about actually to see DJ Moore get that opportunity to finally be paired with a quarterback with a talent that like he's never seen before in his career. And he still managed to be a wide receiver one last year. So even though we think that DJ Moore is probably going to be the guy this year, we wouldn't be shocked if Odunze like blows everyone away and ends up being the first option going into 2025. Like that is absolutely in the cards for Odunze even in 24. So we're going to rank him this high. Most people have him ranked this high, and it's absolutely merited between the draft capital, the opportunity in that offense with Caleb Williams, and the draft. Or I already said the draft capital,
well,
but I'm going to say it again.
Mention the draft capital.
The draft capital as well.
Let's move down to the D's tier before Nathan says draft capital again. Devon Achane is going to be at the
capital.
That's probably true.
Yep.
D is actually for Devon Achane, and Achane is a guy that is highly controversial among Dynasty players right now
Very.
because he was the most efficient running back like ever last year when he was healthy. The when he was healthy part is why it's controversial, because he's tiny. The durability was always going to be a concern, and he's already showcased in his NFL career that he's going to have a little bit of trouble staying on the field. We're not going to bet on injury. If he stays on the field, he is legit. He's going to move up 2-3 tiers here. We're going to put him about where he's priced in Dynasty startup drafts right now, 4th, 5th round. But we acknowledge this guy has unlimited ceiling. He's extremely fun to watch. Every time he touches the ball, he's the most explosive player on the field. And it was like nobody could tackle him last year. Nobody even touched him. I mean, how many runs did he have that were 20-plus yards that were untouched? It's ridiculous. He's an insane talent. But again, it's baked into his Dynasty price that he has some concerns. And at that price, I'm okay buying him because, again, the risk is there, and the risk is already factored in when you're drafting him in the 4th or 5th round. If you lose a 4th round starter pick, darn, like it's not the same as losing a 2nd round starter pick, where he would be had he played an entire season last year at that rate. So he's really good, and we're excited to see what he does this year, especially.
Not to mention he's in a 4-pack committee.
Yeah, correct. Trey McBride is going to be next on this list, and Trey McBride is somebody that we have in the same tier here as Dalton Kincaid and Brock Bowers. So we'll talk about all three of these guys. McBride, I think he's in the second best situation here. Obviously behind Kincaid, but I will say I rank their situations closely because Kyler Murray uses his tight end a crap ton. You've seen it every time Kyler Murray has had a competent tight end. Zach Ertz was the first example of this. And then Trey McBride at the end of last year, when after week 10, he didn't even play before that. But after he was playing, if we can put his game log up, I mean, the dude was drawing an insane amount of targets, where if you extrapolate that over an entire season, the dude is going to be extremely productive. And we know that targets have a direct correlation to fantasy points. If this dude sees as many targets this year as we think he could, he might end up being the top-ranked tight end next Dynasty offseason. That wouldn't surprise me at all.
You want to hear this fun fact?
Yeah.
He only had 70 less yards, 65 less yards than Sam Laporta on the year.
And
7 less
and look at
touchdowns.
his game log up front. He didn't even play.
7 less
That's what
touchdowns.
I'm saying. I wouldn't be surprised at all if he's the tight end one.
And he had the almost the same amount of receptions.
Yeah.
Which is nuts. That's how much. That's how backloaded the latter half of the season was for him.
Now we have Dalton Kincaid ranked right next to him, and I honestly don't blame you if you want to go McBride over Kincaid and call it a day, just because McBride has already shown that he's going to get those targets, and so you might feel a little more comfortable with that. Yep. I'm okay with that. They're different types of tight ends. McBride is somewhat of a more traditional tight end, but he's very athletic and very strong. He's not like Michael Mayer traditional tight end, but he's closer to a traditional tight end than Dalton Kincaid is. And Dalton Kincaid, in terms of what type of tight end is he, he's really just a big slot, but a big slot in Josh Allen's offense. And that's a pretty big qualifying statement there, because if Josh Allen does use his best pass catcher, which is Dalton Kincaid, he is a better pass catcher than Khalil Shakir and Curtis Samuel. Doesn't mean he'll be more productive than those guys, but if he uses him like he's that level of talent, then Dalton Kincaid should have a breakout year this year. We've been betting on that all offseason. It'll be interesting to see if that happens. Brock Bowers is a guy that we saw in the first preseason game. They were using him very similar to how he was used at Georgia. It's almost like the Raiders might actually know what they're doing, and it's almost like they maybe took him for a reason. They might plan to feature Brock Bowers very heavily in their offense this year. If that's the case, and if he does see rookie year production, he's going to be 2-3 tiers higher next year. There's all of these tight ends in this tier, including Pitts in the tier below, are all guys that have a ton of potential to move up, and it's just kind of waiting to see which one is going to make that move and which one's going to make that jump this year. But I'm telling you, this is a good time in the NFL in Dynasty for tight ends right now, especially for young tight ends. This is the most promising group of young tight ends I think I've seen since I played Dynasty. There are 5 guys here that you look at, and all of them legitimately could end up being the tight end one within a year, and all of them are playing in decent situations for the most part. There's a lot to like here. And then let's talk about the rest of this tier. Zay Flowers is a guy that we think could make an elite jump this year if he gets a good amount of targets, significant increase in targets from last year to this year. He's a guy that we think could have low or high-end wide receiver 2 upside, borderline low-end wide receiver 1 upside. The dude is elite. He runs routes at an elite level. The only thing he's missing is the target. So if he gets that opportunity this year, we'll be really excited about that. Kyron Williams is a guy that a lot of people have kind of faded starting at the end of last season because he didn't play, and so there's recency bias attached to that. But then you talk about that they brought in Blake Corum, and they drafted him in the 3rd round. People like Blake Corum a lot. So naturally, logically, this makes sense. If you're that high on Blake Corum and his opportunity in LA, you have to be lower on Kyron. We are not that high on Blake Corum, and so we are higher on Kyron as a result. And we think Kyron Williams is going to be relevant for at least the next 2 years. And last year, he was scoring 20 points a game. I think the touchdown regression is going to happen there. But he's a guy that you can feel comfortable about investing in a stud running back and not breaking the bank to do it. Tank Dell is the last guy. Tank Dell, you saw, scored a touchdown in his first preseason game. However, he was the odd man out on 3 wide receiver sets. And so there's both sides of that coin. I don't think Tank Dell will have any problems being productive this year. I just think he's going to be productive at a wide receiver 3 level, a wide receiver 4 level. And that's good. In an offense where you have Stephon Diggs and Nico Collins, who in my opinion are the wide receivers 1A and 1B there, I think you're looking at Tank Dell having a solid season. I think he's going to maintain his value as well. And I think he's also a value wild card going into next season, depending on what they do with Stephon Diggs. If Stephon Diggs leaves, then Tank Dell's right back to where he was last year, and that was on pace to be a wide receiver 1. Even though it was touchdown heavy, he was on pace to do that. So big tier of guys here, but all guys with a ton of upside and all guys that could make pretty easy jumps into the higher tiers next year. So.
Yeah, and Kyle Pitts at the top of the F tier here is, low-key controversial because you really could have him at the tail end of the D tier, really anywhere you wanted. At the end of the day, if Kyle Pitts ended up over Trey McBride, Brock Bowers, and Dalton Kincaid from a Dynasty rankings perspective going into 2025, I wouldn't be shocked at all, right? Because as much as we like Drake London in Dynasty this year and say how much value upside he has, we'd be stupid if we weren't admitting that logic should be applied to Kyle Pitts as well. He really does have that ability and that upside to skyrocket up boards just because Kirk Cousins is in that offense. Because when you saw what Cousins was able to do by helping support Hawk and J-Jeff and Addison all at the same time in that offense, right? It's kind of scary what he's capable of providing from a production perspective in Atlanta. And Kyle Pitts, again, as a talent, is absolutely able to turn that opportunity into production. We just got to see it. So he's going to be at the top of the F tier here comfortably. And then Jonathan Brooks, a lot of this is projection. Again, it's going to always be projection with rookies, but we are very comfortable and confident that Jonathan Brooks is going to get a bell cow workload and opportunity in Carolina where they need that type of running back. And let me just tell you, that second round pick that Carolina spent on Jonathan Brooks this year, they did not take that lightly. It's not like Carolina has a plethora of rookie picks for the next year. They gave it all up for Bryce Young, and it doesn't look very good right now. And they really have to invest in the defense, and they have a lot of positions they need to invest in, and they went out of their way to go draft Jonathan Brooks, a running back, in the second round. That is big time investment for a team that's very, very limited from a rookie pick perspective, and we expect him to get pretty solid opportunity as a rookie coming off the ACL in the second half of 2024. Brian Thomas Jr., the more I think about the situation, the more I like it. Calvin Ridley, they didn't want to pay Calvin Ridley, and instead of paying him, they just went and they drafted Brian Thomas. Not to mention Christian Kirk in the last year of his deal with Jacksonville. As much as we like Christian Kirk as a value this year in Dynasty, especially in fantasy, I don't think they're going to re-sign him. That's just my personal opinion. I think they're kind of going to move on from Christian Kirk and maybe even ride with BTJ exclusively for the foreseeable future on a rookie contract. Rashee Rice, Rashee Rice could be, he could be higher than this. He could definitely be higher than this in a year, right? We did a bunch of projecting out with some of these crowded wide receiver rooms. I think last week when we used Ryan's projection tool. And at the end of the day, Rashee Rice came out on top next to Travis Kelce, every single time, because the amount of volume that he's commanding as an exclusive slot wide receiver there with Patrick Mahomes is it is so safe. It's so safe. You know exactly what you're going to get with Rashee Rice. His yak ability is very, very underrated. And I don't think we're going to even have to worry about the suspension stuff until 2025. Because that court date isn't even until
people
November,
sure
December.
Aren't thinking about it right now. I mean, it's like people have
right,
forgotten
but everybody's,
about it.
I don't know. Everybody's terrified about it. Still, because his value is so low.
I mean,
what?
He's a good value then. People aren't. It's not even being discussed right now. Among the media, among the team,
No, it's just Dynasty.
It's literally just Dynasty
it's
players
ridiculous.
that are he's going to get suspended. And if redraft, it kind of makes sense to be scared of. But in Dynasty, you're this is
because
a dude
the tail end of the
came
season.
Out and was
right.
Patrick Mahomes wide receiver 1 in his rookie year. He's a sophomore now, and you're getting him for what?
Way less than the pre-incident stuff.
Because he was going in the 4th round before that.
I know, and he was a sell then. JSN is going to be our next guy here. Again, this is kind of a projection thing. I know he's going into his second year. I personally, from what we saw from the Seahawks last year and what JSN was able to showcase on the field with Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf last year, was impressive to us in an offense that I think was not great at all from a play calling perspective. Like Shane Waldron, I don't think you utilize the talent of anyone in that offense like he should have and like Ryan Grubb will this year. So expect JSN to have a big jump in production and opportunity this season. I mean, talk about capitalizing on his opportunity last year, which was very limited. I think he had a game-winning touchdown. He had some ridiculous just catches in the red zone. I think he's a dark horse this year to light it up. Xavier Worthy, he's going to be behind Rashee Rice, but in the same tier because I think his upside is higher, but obviously he's not as proven. He's been lighting it up in camp. He's been looking pretty good overall this offseason, and they invested in him in the first round, the Chiefs did. And now with the Marquise Brown injury, I think you're going to see Xavier Worthy push into a starting role sooner than maybe you initially expected in the regular season. So that is something to monitor and keep an eye on. Xavier Worthy could be moving up boards pretty quickly and a lot sooner than a lot of us expected. Jordan Addison, he's been falling too far, guys.
Yep.
I think we were kind of leading the anti-hype train with Jordan Addison, saying like you got to sell the guy. He has limited upside, limited ceiling, and then this legal stuff happens and the DUI, and then he fell in value, and then he just kept falling and falling and falling in value because people realize, oh, he's the wide receiver 2 behind Justin Jefferson with no Kirk Cousins now. Duh, why did we not realize that before? Anyways, with Addison now, he has fallen too far where he's like kind of a buy now.
He absolutely is a buy.
There's a huge tier, right? There's a huge tier of wide receivers that are all really good wide receivers, but they all pretty much have the same production ceiling. Jordan Addison was previously going at the top of that tier. Now he's at the bottom of that tier.
Yep.
Philosophically, you want to go with the guys at the bottom of that tier because they have the same production ceiling. Now that Addison's at the bottom of the tier, at that tier, you want to be investing in him. Same with Lab McConkey. Lab McConkey, I don't know why people didn't catch on to this sooner, but he is going to be the top option in that offense. You can say what you want about Josh Palmer. You can say what you want about Quentin Johnson, which not many people are saying much about him, but really it's just Josh Palmer. Like, guys, it's Lab McConkey, please. Like, please just listen to us here. Like, he is by far the best talent there. He is going to get the most opportunity. In my opinion, he fits what that offense is going to do better than anyone else in that offense because this coaching regime drafted him at the beginning of the second round. Mm-hmm. Come on. Like, it's going to be Lab McConkey, and he's going to get a lot of opportunities in the red zone. You're seeing it in training camp. I am buying that hype. And then we're going to go to the G here.
Yeah.
G tier.
Let's go to the G here. Keon Coleman's going to be at the top of the G here. And honestly, with Keon, the main thing is, can he outproduce Curtis Samuel and Khalil Shakir? Because I think that is a question. If he doesn't, I don't think he's dead. But he is a guy that, again, we said was a little bit raw. So keep your expectations low for him. That being said, I think he's really talented. He's really athletic. And he's playing with Josh Allen. Not the same Josh Allen offense it was 2 years ago, but still Josh Allen offense. James Cook, his teammate, is going to be right next to him. And we like Cook. We like his high floor. He is a guy that's not going to get a ton of red zone carries, and we've seen that. And the Bills have proven time and time again they just don't want to use him there. And with that being said, he's so good between the 20s that he's definitely going to hold some value for a little bit, at least as long as he's on his rookie contract. I think he's got, 2 years now on his rookie deal, right?
Yeah.
And so for the next two years, you feel pretty good about James Cook, and I would honestly feel good about him going somewhere else if he didn't stay with the Bills long term. With that being said, I like his value in Dynasty, and I think he's a good guy to invest in the 6th round if you need starting running backs and you don't want to go running back up top. James Cook is a good guy there. Jaden Reed is the next guy here, and with Reed, this is a Packers wide receiver room where we don't know. We don't know about Dubs, who has gotten all the hype so far out of training camp. We don't know about Wicks, who all the Packers fans swear up and down, and everybody points and says, oh, look at his yards per out run and how efficient he was. And everybody says he's the next Devontae. And I'm like, okay. We don't know about Christian Watson, who he has the hamstring stuff, and he also is terrible at running routes, awful statistically at running routes. But everybody's like, oh, he fixed the hamstring because he went to the witch doctor, and the witch doctor decided he had one shorter hamstring, and he pulled it out and stretched it like Willy Wonka's taffy, and then now good. He's fine. And so I don't know about Jaden Reed because you've got all these different guys there, and everybody seems to like each one of them for a different reason. The one guy that people seem to not make excuses for is Jaden Reed, and Jaden Reed honestly has the best argument out of any of them to back because he's done it. The guy had 8 touchdowns last year. The guy on 100 targets, essentially, was producing at a wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 level. And although he did it with all those guys on the field, still we have people that are saying that he's not the guy. And so because of the uncertainty, we'll put him in the G tier, but I think he's a guy that if he separates himself from the rest of that room this year,
at the very
he's
least,
very good.
At the very least, he has a safe floor because he is the
Absolutely.
slot wide receiver. Remember when we got so crapped on for saying that he was going to be the slot wide
It
receiver?
was just by that one dude. Remember that guy?
No, it was multiple.
Well, but it was mostly that one dude who said that he wasn't. He's like, well, he wasn't going to be the slot. What do you think they drafted him to do? Kenneth Walker's down here. Kenneth Walker, a guy that some people really love Kenneth Walker. We don't love Kenneth Walker. We don't dislike him, but I think we are realistic about what he's done in the NFL from a fantasy perspective, and that's like pretty much nothing. I mean, being a like mid to low and wide running back the last 2 years says pretty much nothing about your ceiling as an NFL running back. And a lot of people are going to say, okay, new offensive coordinator, new scheme. You're talking about an offensive coordinator that's going to want to pass the ball a lot.
Yes.
If anything, the scheme is not going to help Kenneth Walker unless they decide that Kenneth Walker is the receiving back, which with him being there and Zach Charbonnet being there, I'm not totally sure that'll happen. Kenneth Walker's a guy we've been waiting to be a running back one for a long time. Maybe this is the year he does it. I don't know. I hope it is, but until then, we're going to keep him here. George Pickens is a guy that we're probably going to get crapped on. People are going to say, Pickens in the G tier, this is the channel's joke, blah, blah, blah. And we do this every time with Pickens. Sometimes we don't even put him on this list. And listen, for Pickens, it's this. Targets directly correlate to fantasy points. George Pickens does not get enough targets. George Pickens does not have a play style that will get him enough targets. George Pickens is not in an offense that will get him enough targets. George Pickens is not playing with a quarterback that will be able to get him enough catchable targets. And so unless George Pickens overnight somehow becomes this miraculous route runner that all of a sudden works the middle of the field and gets all these intermediate targets, George Pickens is not probably going to produce at a high-end wide receiver 2 level. And when he doesn't do that, he's just, look, he's good for what he is. He's good for what he is, right? He is a boom-bust guy. If you're playing in a Dynasty Best Ball League or a regular Best Ball League, you're like, George Pickens, that guy. Because he's either a wide receiver 1 or he's nothing. Every single week. We saw this in some of the statistics we looked at for the redraft channel. He was a wide receiver 1 34% of the time, and then like a wide receiver 2 like 6% of the time, and then the rest of it he was a wide receiver 3 or lower. He's either scoring a touchdown and getting you those points, or he's not doing anything. Because again, he's not getting enough targets to have a high floor, or really a floor at all. His floor is 0. His floor is 0. And so with Pickens, it's not about the situation. It's not about Pickett. It's not about any of that. It's the fact that George Pickens, as a player, as good as he is at certain things, big plays, body control, all that. For fantasy, there are better options here. Xavier Legette is one of them. Xavier Legette is in this tier. And I'd rather just take my shot on Xavier Legette, even though Xavier Legette has gotten a lot of...
So many rounds further down than George Pickens.
Absolutely.
And you're going to get so much hate for that.
I don't even know why I threw Xavier Legette on here, honestly. He probably shouldn't be in this tier, but here's my point. With Legette, he is a guy at least... He's in a fresh offense with an offensive-minded head coach in Dave Canales. He is extremely athletic, and it's a clean slate. You don't know what Xavier Legette is going to be. I don't honestly. Xavier Legette was just the next guy on the list when I was looking, and I was writing all these down. So maybe he's not on this tier, but either way, like... at price, I'd rather take a shot on Legette. Obviously, in a vacuum, I'm taking Pickens. But Benson's going to be the last guy on this list, Trey Benson. And I think you should not expect a lot from him this year unless James Conner gets hurt, which is not all that unlikely. But Trey Benson is a guy that got good draft capital. He projects out to be a good prospect and a good running back in the NFL. It's going to be if he puts it together, when and if he does get the chance to do that. And then how far up does he go? So, and how good does that offense get over the next couple of years? So there you go. Updated Dynasty Cornerstone rankings. Let us know what you would change here outside of not having Pickens and Legette in the same tier, which I'm just thinking now, Luke, you probably just shouldn't put them up there because I don't know why I put Legette on here, but I'm glad you pointed that out too. But do us a huge favor. If you play Dynasty, we're trying to hit 15,000 subscribers. What?
Do you want to just...
No, it's fine. Just if you play Dynasty, 15,000 subscribers, so go ahead and subscribe if you can help us get there. Make sure you drop a like on the video as well. They can admire me being an idiot in 4K. How about that? All right, we appreciate you guys. We'll see you later.